Thank you for joining me for another quick hits conversation. Today, I would like to talk about what makes something a reality. Brea, kick us off.
Yeah, sure. So reality to me is extremely tangible. I see it as something that I can feel or I can see, I can touch or I can experience. So for me, I see it almost like looking back at my life that I've had these experiences or had these goals that I achieved. I see getting to reality was almost a step-by-step process. And I feel like each step, like reality is almost for me like a gradient and it's not black and white. Like reality doesn't usually hit me hard. I've never had anything super traumatic happen to me where I had to face reality extremely quickly, but most of the time it's a gradient for me where each step I feel like it's more real and more real and more real. So yeah, it's extremely tangible. I have to see it in that way. It's not super philosophical. But also what I love about reality is that I feel like the experiences that I've had in the past and where I've reached that moment of this is real and this is happening. A thing that has grown inside me is empathy. So I feel like reality almost grows my ability to empathize with other people and help them in their troubles or in similar situations or, experiences. So that's kind of like my take on it. I love to hear everyone else's take on it too.
Yeah.
I think there's like three kinds of reality. I think there's for me, there's the tangible thing, which is what I can see, I can touch, I can smell, I can verify. That to me is what I consider mostly reality. Then I think there is the virtual reality, brought on by artificial intelligence, which is really changing how we interact with each other, how we do business, how we're going to do business going forward, even how we're going to drive our cars and everything else. And then there is the political reality, which is basically whatever they say it is. And then you have to either agree with it, disagree with it. You can try to, verify it. But politicians have their own way of defining what reality is.
Interesting. Atif, that's your choice. Go ahead.
I will kick. Thanks. I think you guys have said everything. I was just wondering, the key thing about reality comes out in my mind is like reality of what, right? As I start thinking about it, I was like really going into, there's so much of physical thing that we see, but this is all really comes down to how people have all agreed upon this as being real and this is not real. What's in our consciousness, right? How are we perceiving things? Like you send that joke out with, my perception and your perception and my reality. Well, the fact is it's so true. As you start digging deeper, it becomes such of a, metaphysical and all of other dimensions of the world that we don't really understand that very well. The reality of time, for example, we just know what we all have agreed upon. So sometimes for me, the reality is what most people agree and take that perception to be more of a reality than anything, right? So that's, in my opinion, like you have to kind of define it with what time frame and what other, frame of references you're using to define a reality that may help you define certain things in terms of reality. But otherwise, it's all real. It's all real as long as you believe it's real. And if it's not, you don't believe it, it's not real. Most of the things.
I want to share that joke for the people who are listening or are watching, because I shared it when I emailed you guys this, but they're like, what joke? So when I do speaking engagements, I will often ask the audience, what's the difference between perception and reality? And the difference is perception is what you think. Reality is what I think.
Yeah.
So that leads me to the question is, can reality be wrong? Like, can you disagree about reality?
Yeah, I completely agree that you can disagree. I think it is almost a product of our life experiences and our beliefs. So someone else's reality to me may not feel real yet, and may not feel like it's something that's implemented in my life. I have to get to a certain stage where I feel like, I have to believe in it, that this is part of my life or this is happening. But I think everyone does that at different stages and does it at different time frames.
And you see that very prevalent, I think, right now, what's going on with the vaccinations and with masking. People have very different perceptions of the value of masking and vaccinations. That becomes their reality. So they may think that, hey, it doesn't do anything, so why should I be vaccinated, or why should I wear a mask? Because, I don't think it's effective. I think it's going to change things. That may not be the reality, but that's their perception.
So that it is their reality, but for other people, the facts create a different reality, and therefore it becomes perception.
I look at it this way, right? I'm going to kind of segue into my previous comments. Can it be a reality if it's wrong?
What makes it wrong, though?
Right. So it's all about the metrics that you define, use to define these things, right? I think that's kind of segue into what I was kind of saying earlier. Can it be wrong, right? If it's wrong, is it a reality? Is it still a reality? How do you come to that conclusion that it's a wrong reality when it wouldn't be called that, right? So again, I think Brea mentioned that a little bit. It's really about subjective reality, right? How we experience things, what is real to me is really very subjective. Can it be wrong for someone else? Of course, because I experienced it. They may completely look at it a different way. Rick, you mentioned about vaccination, right? People have completely different views and they look at it differently and they have different opinions about it. So, well, that's their reality, right? That's how they perceive it. That's how they believe it to be.
Yeah, and from a marketing and public relations advertising perspective, it means various things as well. When I was in grad school, one of my professors said that there's multiple realities and multiple perceptions. For example, if you're a company and you're trying to communicate about a particular issue, there is the reality, what the issue really is, what you want people to think it should be, and where it's actually going. And then from the end user or the receiver's audience, what they see, there is what they perceive, what they want it to be, and what they think it could be. I mean, it's just so many different levels of things here, and trying to match them up is important.
Yeah. So what it sounds like we're saying, you can twist reality or make something a reality that may or may not be a reality depending upon the spin you put on it. And I do think that we're talking a lot about leaving space, and that empathy you mentioned, Brea, is a really big point, like leaving space for people to have a different reality, which in my brain is like twisting my little brain around. Like, wait a minute, other people have different realities than I do. Am I in the fourth dimension? What's going on here?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's something that maybe isn't conscious, because for me, looking back, I realized that I developed that empathy. But in the moment, I'm like, why am I going through this? What's the point of this? And looking back, I'm like, I developed a lot. I learned a lot. There was a reason for that. And now I can mentor and help other people.
Are feelings reality? Are feelings part of reality, or are feelings something else?
Well, there is one thing about this, right? There are certain things that are absolute, right? For example, I was going to type that quickly, but for example, death is absolute. We know that everybody sees that. So sometimes we are so away from that and we see that as a reality. And maybe that's where we develop the empathy of what is actually real, right? What is evident, is that a reality too, right? How do you kind of go with that? I think that's what it comes down to. The thing that we know are absolute truth are the reality, and everything else is your received perception. What Rick was talking about, creating that is the majority perception becomes a reality eventually. Can I see it? Right? Is that how it goes? Enough people believe in something, does it really become a reality of that thing?
One of my favorite courses when I was still back in college is I studied logic. And logic was very interesting because you could actually look at what somebody was saying and be able to analyze it and really understand what are they really saying here. And they could be putting out a lot of messages, which on the surface sound like they're credible, sound like they are 100% true, they are the reality. But when you understand and you can basically pull the components apart, you look at it and say, well, they're only speaking a piece of it. So you're getting part of the truth, part of the reality, but your perception is whatever they said it was. So populist politicians do that all the time. They try to reach this big audience and just basically tell them what they think they want to hear. And if you don't think for yourself, that becomes the perception, that becomes the reality for you.
Right. Oh, there's my little dog. I told you dogs bark during these things. So it sounds like what we're saying is that there is room for different perceptions of reality, and that reality is not a concrete thing at all. And so we have to have empathy with each other when other people's perceptions differ from ours. That is our 10 minutes, so I'm going to have to cut us off there. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I have enjoyed it immensely. It twisted my brain, and I love that. I'll talk to you guys again soon.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.